he's doing the thing that movies will do sometimes where they're like, we'll have a character acknowledge how ridiculous the situation is just so we can be like, hey, we get it. This is a ridiculous plot. Just go with us because you're going to have a good time.
Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 76, recorded March 2023. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we talk with a Trekkie, we scan their fandom with a tricorder, and we try to figure out why we all love this show so much. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 76. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or the Twitter @TrekProfiles. Here's your spoiler warning. As we recorded this, we were in the middle of Star Trek Picard Season 3, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, humans. As always, my sidekick and co-host is the perfectly pleasant, painfully pedantic, yet pointlessly provocative M5 Multitronic unit.
M5 powered up.
Let's do the announcements, M5.
Announcements ready.
This is an independent Star Trek podcast. If you'd like to support us, the best way you can do that is just to follow us wherever you're getting your audio. We're on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. Another way that you can show your support is to make a small donation to our official charity here at the show. That's the Children's Fund for Glycogen Storage Disease. A donation in any amount helps, as they are doing some research to cure this terrible genetic condition. I talked about this more in episode 34 of the show, so if you're able and you'd like, please head over to trekprofiles.com/donate, and you'll see the link there to give directly to the charity, and I'll also put a link in the show notes. Thank you for considering it. There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of this episode. In fact, I think there's a lot of it in this one. They will come after the ending audio cards. Enjoy it, or not, as you choose. At the end of every episode, my guest faces my Kobayashi Maru lightning round. They get 5 terrible multiple-choice Star Trek questions, and they have to give us their answer. After each episode drops, I tweet those questions out as polls, where you can have your say. So let's take a look at the questions from episode 74 with Brianne Leeson and see how it went. Question 1. Visit a Federation world. Will it be Bolarus, Beta Z, Benzar, or Barzan 2? My guest picked Beta Z, and so did most of the poll people. I think they were looking to crash some local weddings. They heard the food tended to be good. Beta Z got 74%, Bolarus got 13%, Barzan 2 got 10%, and Benzar only got 3%. Brilliant. Question 2. What is your favorite condiment to put on your gach? Haligian tongue sauce, squill syrup, yamak sauce, or Ketracel White Hot? My guest, the hot sauce aficionado, picked Ketracel White Hot, but yamak sauce was the choice in the poll with 42%. Ketracel White Hot only got 24%, and the squill syrup and the tongue sauce were tied at 17 apiece. Preposterous. Question 3. What is your opinion on the emission of Corridan to the United Federation of Planets? Admit, reject, or abstain? This, of course, was the main plot point in the TOS episode Journey to Babel. My guest chose to abstain along with 17.5% of the online poll respondents, but 75% agreed with Ambassador Sarek that Corridan should be admitted, with 7.5% agreeing that the Tellarite Ambassador Gav that admission should be denied. Dang. Question 4. You are sending someone to the Star Trek Agonizer booth. Which episode is on back-to-back replay? Deep Space Nine, Let He Who Is Without Sin, TNG's Shades of Grey, TOS, The Alternative Factor, or the short trek, The Trouble with Edward. Now, before I get into the results, a fair number of people suggested that Code of Honor should be on the list. Now, I can tell you the M5 talked about it, and we agreed that it should be excluded before we even asked the question, mostly because we thought it would get most of the votes. The very best lightning round questions should have room for disagreement and not unanimity in the answers. If there's an obvious answer, it's probably not going to be a good question. So the omission was intentional. Okay, on to the results. My guest picked the TNG clip show Shades of Grey, and that one also won the poll with 40.2%. The Alternative Factor came in second place with 26.8%. In third was the Deep Space Nine show with 19.6%. And in last place was The Trouble with Edward at 13.5%. When did Twitter start using decimals in polls? It's kind of peachy. And finally, question 5. Which is the worst Star Trek convention cosplay idea? A gross of self-sealing stem bolts, a GNDN conduit, a fractured dilithium crystal, or an impulse engine? Brienne picked the impulse engine, and it got 30% in the poll. But coming in first place were the stem bolts with 45%. The GNDN conduits were in third place at 15%, and in last place was the poor, broken dilithium crystal at 10%. Now, if you enjoyed those questions and would like to take a stab at writing your own for possible inclusion in the show, you can just send them to me at feedback@trekprofiles.com or DM me on Twitter. Okay, I got one piece of errata for you. At one point in this episode, I was trying to recall the word enophile, which is a term for a fan of wines, and I could not remember it, and I stumbled around for a bit. I left the mistake in, mostly because I don't really care about it, but I just wanted to say, you don't have to let me know the correct word. I got it all figured out. All right, that's going to do it for announcements. Let's get to it. M5, start the show.
Commencing.
His favorite captain is Picard, with Pike rapidly closing up the distance. His favorite character is Data, and he loves the Miranda class the best. From Ontario, North America, Canada, Earth, it's Cristian Fox. Welcome, Cristian, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm very excited for today.
Yeah, Cristian, I got to say, you are the first person that I've actually gotten on the show that I discovered via TikTok. So this is very interesting for me. And we'll have to talk a little bit about being a Star Trek TikToker a little bit later.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience from the Twitterverse where I normally hang out. So anyway, I have strayed too far, and the M5 is already yelling at me that I have not asked question one, which is, are you a Star Trek fan?
Yes, 100%.
And are you one of the lifers?
Yeah, I think so. I would say I got into it when I was 5. So yeah, I'm a lifer.
And what was the first Star Trek you remembered watching as a kid?
Okay, this is hard. I think the story was my mom was watching The Measure of a Man for a university class. She was in teacher's college at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember vividly seeing Worf's head and being terrified and crying. And then somehow I fell in love with it.
So this obviously was Next Generation.
Yeah, Next Generation.
And that was your first Trek.
First Trek, exactly.
And as a kid, did you just like tune in at the same time every week, or did you just watch it along with mom? How did that work?
I don't remember. It's such a weird thing where I remember that first moment of seeing Worf's head and being scared, and then just always watching it. But I don't remember if I watched it with her, if I watched it by myself, but it was just something that was just always there.
So you're growing up and you're watching TNG. Did you just stay a consistent watcher of Star Trek as you were growing up?
Yeah, it was like one of those things where I watched it so much and memorized so many lines. And like I would watch all of the original series movies, the TNG movies, all the time to the point where I wasn't watching any Disney. And now when I think back to Disney movies, I'm like, wait, did I see those ones? Or did I see this one or that one? Because I was watching Star Trek.
And as we sit here in 2023, how much of all the broadcast and streamed Star Trek have you seen?
I would say everything, I think. I feel like there's half of an episode of TNG that I haven't finished, which is really weird.
You're going to have to say more about that, my bad.
Oh, yeah. So it's Birthright Part 2. And I don't know why, but I've tried to watch the second part of that episode many times, and I just never get through it. Like I find it very slow, but it's been a few years, so I want to go back to it.
Oh goodness, that's all that's in your way from being a completist? I mean, that's usually a pretty well regarded episode too.
Birthright Part 2, is it generally considered like? Because I know Part 1 is cool because it's TNG hanging out with the DS9 crew.
Yeah, well, I try not to speak on behalf of the fandom, but I can just say that, generally speaking, that's not one that you see showing up on people's hate lists. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't hate it, but that's a very odd thing to admit on a Trek podcast.
All right. Well, are you going to commit to trying to get through it, Cristian, and become a completist?
Yes, I'm going to try and I'll commit to watching it and finishing it, I should say.
And so as we record this, it's March 2023, and a lot of Star Trek is now on streaming, of course. And so you're keeping up with everything as it comes out, or are you doing mini binges, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up. Like my plan right now with season 3 is to review every episode and to try to get out as quickly as possible. So I'm waking up early in the morning to watch it, and then I'll come home, shoot a video review, and then post it. And I'm loving season 3.
So you made reference to the fact that you are shooting videos. What are you shooting videos for?
Primarily for YouTube, and then I'm posting some of those videos on TikTok. So I'm trying to do shorts because I've been finding that my longer form YouTube videos are not doing that well, but shorts I'm getting a lot of views. And ideally, my whole goal with with my channel yelling about Star Trek is to be what Star Wars theory is to Star Wars, but for Star Trek. Like, I don't know how many listeners like know about Star Wars theory, but basically he just breaks down everything in Star Wars, and it's like you can Google who's this person, why does this thing happen in Star Wars, and Star Wars theory pops up. So I'm trying to build that.
You got to take a step back. This is some other podcaster.
Oh yeah, so this is a YouTuber. I don't actually know his name, but he's like the #1 Star Wars channel, and it's called Star Wars Theory, where he basically just breaks everything down. So I'm trying to build that with the yelling about Star Trek, while also staying current and doing reviews on and breakdowns of each new Picard episode. Okay,
so I will tell you, I'm watching everything pretty much within 24 hours of when it comes out, but I'm not getting up early in the morning to do that. So you're in what time zone? Central or Eastern?
Eastern.
Okay, so when are the episodes coming out for you?
So they come out on Thursdays, and so I guess most mornings I'll try to wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. to watch it because I have to go to the gym on Thursdays to meet my trainer. So I have to try and get up, watch that, go to the gym, go to work, then come home and come up with a video. Okay, so your Thursdays are spoken for. Yeah, Thursdays are really tough. I love it, but it's just like I wish. The one thing I don't love about having to do this as content is in the past, what I would do is I would always have a Friday night show where I watch a show that I love and I get food. And then whatever new Trek was out, that would be that thing. And that's what I look forward to. So I'm missing that, but I really do love getting or staying current with it. And there's also been times where I've been spoiled on things just by scrolling on YouTube the day of an episode, and that really bugs me. So it's just like, okay, I gotta watch it in the morning if I can. A lot of people who don't do content creation may not understand the amount of work that goes into something like this. And doing an audio podcast like I do, I know what the work is involved in that. Doing a weekly video show like you're doing is a tremendous amount of work. So one of the things I'm curious about is, do you find that the amount of work involved in that sort of changes your relationship to Star Trek in a way? I mean, I could easily see how you could develop sort of a love-hate relationship with it, but I don't know. That just might be me making up stuff. How would you respond to that? See, it's interesting. It's an interesting question because for a long time, I was like, okay, I want to do YouTube and I love men's fashion. So I did men's fashion videos for quite a while, enjoyed it, and was like, I'm not going to do Star Trek because Star Trek is the thing that I want to watch and the thing that I enjoy. I don't want it to become work. But then I started doing it and I realized it's not like, yes, even though the one negative is I wish I could watch Picard on a Friday night instead of having to wake up early in the morning. That's like the one drawback. But I love it because it's my chance for me to do something that I love, which is making videos and using that creativity, but talking about something that I can talk about forever. And it also makes my fandom feel more legitimate. Not that you need to do it, not that you need to create content to be a legitimate fan, but it makes me feel like, okay, I'm not just some crazy person who's watching it all the time. I get to talk about it and I know people are enjoying it. And it's like, I'm not alone. And even with my family, it feels like now they're like, he's not just some nerdy kid who used to watch it at my house when we would want to watch something else, but it's like, oh, he's actually getting traction from it. So I really enjoy that aspect. Do you ever feel pressure to like say something insightful about these new episodes, given the compressed timeline that you're working on? I mean, I know I would feel a lot of pressure, but I can't imagine what it's like. So I'm curious how that experience is for you. Yeah, a little bit, because it's like I always see the Easter eggs popping up, and it's like, oh, I want to be one of those people that's like, hey, I'm going to take you through every Easter egg in this episode, but I can't do that. So I try to keep it to a super quick, like, here's what I liked about the episode. I try to keep it spoiler free because I want people to be able to watch the video and not feel like, oh, I can't watch it until I've seen the episode. And then I'll do a more in-depth video later. But even that, I am finding it challenging because it's like, okay, what analysis can I provide that, hasn't been said before? Because usually by the time I'm able to do a in-depth video, there's already a ton of other videos out there who do really good stuff. There's like Trek Central, they do great videos. There's Trek Culture, which they have great breakdowns. So I was like, what can I really add? So I do find that challenging. A lot of Star Trek content creators are more doing sort of rewatch shows
or things where they're like analyzing sort of broader themes in Star Trek over a period of time. So like they don't have that weekly thing where like you got to bang this thing out this week, you know. So that's why I asked you about that, because I think that just the pressure of that would be enormous.
Yeah, the pressure is there, but it's really only for me because I find a lot of people are discovering my content through shorts, so they're not expecting something new. It's more of a pride thing where I want to be able to be out there every week with a new review video, and then in between that I'm trying to do character breakdowns or technology breakdowns, and I'm trying to work through each of the series just so that eventually it gets to a point where someone's like, oh, who's the guy on TNG with the yellow eyes who's a little bit strange, like, oh, that's Commander Data, and they type in who's Data, my video pops up.
Nice.
So it's a lot, but I see where it's going, so I don't always feel the pressure. And also, to be fair, I'm not big enough to the point where people are going to be emailing me or spamming my inbox if I don't put out a new video, because I'm not there yet. Hopefully one day.
Your audience hasn't captured you yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a thing that does happen. So, okay, as someone who thinks thoughtfully about Star Trek, we have several shows in production, all of them very different. I mean, you know, it's whatever you think of whatever new show that we currently have in the Star Trek universe coming out on Paramount Plus. They're all very different from each other. What is your opinion on the state of Star Trek in March 2023?
I think it's good. I think it's in a very good place. I know when Discovery came out, there was a lot of backlash, and I love aspects of Discovery. I don't think it's my favorite show, but I don't hate it. I know that, like, a lot of people, there's a lot of fans out there who just don't want to accept it, which I sort of get. And I felt like, okay, we were very different, and we were doing all these different things. We had Lower Decks, which I really, really enjoy, but it didn't feel quite like Star Trek. And then when Strange New Worlds came out, I thought, okay, now I think we're finding the balance of how do you make a show that's modern, that people today who are not fans can enjoy it, but then people who are hardcore fans can still feel like they're getting the Trek feels. So now I think we're in this great spot where, yeah, people are always like, well, I want it to be like TNG, or I wish the more original series. We have Strange New Worlds, but if you're in the mood for a comedy, you can watch Lower Decks. And I love that Lower Decks is having, I don't want to say it's having conversations, but it's doing things that we always ask questions about. Because as a longtime fan, we've had all these series with all these amazing characters, always on the Enterprise or the Voyager or DS9, and the places they were always in was like the most important place to be, and they were the top of the top. And of course, you wonder, okay, not everybody can be perfect. What happens to those ships, or what about the ship that isn't really doing anything? So it's great that Lower Decks is there to fill that gap. And I think it's nice to have that contrast between, okay, we're going to have a sort of a serious show, but then we can also just have some fun and poke fun at the tropes of Trek. Mm-hmm. So I think, overall, to answer your question, I think we're in a good spot because I think there's something for everybody.
So when it comes to some of the older Trek and even the newer stuff that's been out for a couple of years, when you want to watch an episode, are you putting in a plastic disc or are you only streaming?
Mostly streaming now. And mostly on my phone. So I just like, all right, what am I in the mood for? I'll pull up something on my phone and then I'll watch it.
I mean, that's always interesting because it's there's a wide variety of what people are doing out there. And some people are like, no, I have to watch it on my 65-inch TV. And some people watch it on their phone. I will tell you, on Thursdays, I'm often in the office. And so I will have it downloaded on my phone and watch it over my lunch break at work. So that's what I'm doing. And it's interesting. People always are doing different stuff like that. Are you a collector at all?
Yeah. So I have a lot of toys. Like, just growing up, it was like, all right, what you're in Toys R Us. What do you want? Okay, there's an Enterprise. I got to get the Enterprise. There's some Klingon ships. I want to get that. So I just collected a lot of the toys. Now I'm sort of moving into like drinks, I guess, maybe alcohol, because I have
Star Trek wines.
Yeah, so I have behind me, I have a Romulan ale, but it's not Star Trek wines. It was something I ordered from some other random website and put water and then put some blue food coloring. But I am trying to get the Star Trek wines. I just got to figure out how I'm going to do that because they don't ship outside of the U.S. So I got to go to Niagara Falls or something and then swing over to Buffalo. But that now is like my new thing because I keep getting emails where I'm like, okay, they've got the new Romulan ale out. And then they just released the Ryzian wines, and I'm like, I want that. So I think that's becoming my the thing that I want to start collecting.
The wines, I will say, are far better than I expected them to be.
Like the actual, like the
actual Star Trek wines and all that stuff. So I was not expecting them to be good. And in my experience, I'm not a vinophile. I am not a wine guy all that much, but they are far better and tastier than I thought than they had any right to be. Because normally, when it comes to like these sort of Star Trek products, like that, they sort of slap a label on anything. Maybe I've been traumatized by buying some of that Federation beer that they sold at the Star Trek Experience like 15 years ago. It was literally just, I think it was just Budweiser or something, like with a new label slapped on it. It was terrible. And that sort of what I was expecting with those Star Trek wines. And they were way better than I'd expected. So we enjoyed them. Yeah. We had a viewing party at my house for some of the new episodes, and people really enjoyed them. So I was really surprised by all that. So, okay, send me pictures of your collection, man, and I will put all that up on the show notes page up at trekprofiles.com.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So when it comes to toys, it sounded like you were buying mostly ships, any Playmates figures, anything like that?
I have, let me see. The ones I seem to have are like a lot of TNG characters. I've got like a Borg from season 2, I'm going to assume. I've got, for some reason, I have season 1 Riker, which I don't know why I have that, or maybe season 2 Riker, and some random Geordies. But I think that they were always given to me, where it's like, oh, Chris is into Star Trek, you should give him, okay, he'll like the action figures or the Playmate toys. But yeah, but ships are my thing. So if I could get a ship that would like make the noises, I was all in.
What's your favorite item in your collection?
Ooh, favorite item? I'd say my Enterprise D. It's just something that I used to play with all the time. The nacelles come off, and I would always try and like take them off and be like, "Oh my gosh, what if the nacelles is damaged? What's going to happen?" So it was just so much fun. I remember one time I got a shuttlecraft. Again, there's a lot of TNG stuff. I got a TNG shuttlecraft, and I had to go to the dentist to get a tooth removed. So for some reason, I'm like, okay, it's going to be painful. I need my shuttlecraft.
Yeah, everyone needs a comfort shuttlecraft. I mean, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So that's great. So you had to bring that with you to the dentist. That's great. Did you put the tooth in it?
No, I actually know what happened to that tooth. I should have. That would have been a good idea.
So we were talking before the official start of the episode, and one of the things you'd let me know is that you'd been to the what we now call STLV last year, and that was your first convention experience. So what made you decide that you had to go to the convention last year?
Well, because I started doing a lot on YouTube, I was like, all right, I can justify it. I'm doing content. I should go. I've always wanted to go. I was like, now I'm in a situation where I can afford it financially. I don't have to worry about, when I'm leaving. All I have to do is just book off time with work, and then I'm good to go. So I decided this is the year, want to do it. And it was amazing.
So what were your biggest expectations, and were they met or not?
Well, biggest expectations, like, of course, I wanted to meet the stars and to see them in real life. But what I really wanted was just being able to hang out with a ton of people who all talked about Star Trek. And that was met. Like, all my expectations were met. I really no regrets.
What was your favorite part of the convention?
Ooh, favorite part? I'd have to say, as much as I loved, again, seeing the panels and getting autographs from everyone that I wanted to get autographs from, it was just hanging out with the people at the convention. Because I'm part of this Facebook group, Star Trek Family. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to meet a lot of them in real life. And it was just fun where we're like, okay, we're like, it's 1:00 in the afternoon. People would be like, hey, I'm over here. Do you guys want to go out for lunch right now? So we all go for lunch, or we'd all go for dinner. And it was just super cool. And then, like, I remember not one time, but it's like the first time I met one couple, and they were part of the Star Trek family. And we all went out to dinner. And it was like, okay, I'm getting used to them. And then we got into a Tuvix debate, and I'm like, all right, these people are awesome. We bonded right then and there over pizza, and it was fantastic.
All right. Well, now I feel like I have to ask you, since you brought it up. Do you want to recount your particular point of view on Tuvix?
I don't know. I'm so
just
torn.
Knowing that I'm not going to give you any grief or anything for whatever side you're on, but do you have a point of view on it?
It's hard because there's the utilitarian. What's that called?
Utilitarian, yes.
Where it's like, okay, she only has 150 people. She has to take one to to get to. I don't know. I can't decide. I short circuit. I'm who's the guy from I'm Mud?
Harcourt Fenton
Norman. What,
Norman
sorry?
the robot? Yep.
Yeah, I'm like Norman. Whenever I think about this, I do the short circuit thing.
All right.
Okay, for right now, at this very moment, I'm going to say she was wrong. She shouldn't have killed him because he was a living person, and she essentially murdered him because she didn't give him the choice and forced him to die. Now,
Well, I think that was the right decision from a writing point of view.
Mhm.
I think if he'd have gone along with it, I think it would have been a cop-out. And I don't
Yeah,
think people
no,
would
that's
still be
true.
talking about this episode, many years later.
for sure. Can I throw out another beef that I have with the episode?
Sure, go for it.
Is that okay? You have an opportunity. Two characters who do not get along, don't understand each other. They become one being, then they get separated. I would have liked down the road for them to have some understanding of each other. Maybe Neelix could have been a bit more understanding of why Tuvok needs to be logical all the time. And Tuvok should have understood a little bit more, hey, this is what makes Neelix tick, and this is why he's the way he is. And I would have loved some of that, but, it was just the nature of the show, too, where they don't always want to refer to previous episodes. But that always kind of bugged me.
So I will just hit you with this. I've talked about it on the show before, so I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the people who say, no, it absolutely had to happen. Like, we got 2 crewmen for the price of 1, utilitarianism, right? It's great. I also love that in Voyager, we meet the Vidians who go out and harvest organs from living people so that other people could live. So then the Vidians are entirely justified from a utilitarian point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not the villains. If you believe that, if you believe in utilitarianism and Janeway was okay in doing that because she got 2 crew members for the price of 1, then the Vidians are getting, 10 of their citizens for the price of 1, right? So that's totally justified then. So not taking a position myself, I'm just saying as an interesting argument, you can always sort of hit people with that, right? and see where it goes. So you can have a good discussion with that. So, okay. So are you going to be going back to the convention next year?
There's a lot of financial obligations I have to make sure that I meet.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's in the cards. I want to, but I'm not sure yet.
All right, fantastic. Well, I know if you go, there's going to be people looking for you once you've been on Trek Profiles because they'll want to come and talk to you and yell at you or celebrate you for your position on Tuvix.
I am happy to argue, and I'm also happy to be celebrated.
So, have you've not been to any of the conventions that are up in your neck of the woods? Nothing up in the Northeast. I know that there are smaller conventions that happen. Any of that stuff on your radar?
I want to try and see more conventions because I'm not really sure what's here. I know we have Fan Expo, but that's a very it's a big convention. But in terms of Star Trek, it's like not only Star Trek because it's just all fandom.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
I don't know of any real Trek conventions in the area. I'm sure there are, but I want to do some more research and see what I can find because I'd love to connect with the Trek community here in Toronto and see where they are.
Yeah, it might be worth a day trip. Well, it's more than a day trip, but like a couple days trip if you can ever swing it is Ticonderoga.
Oh yeah, that's on my list.
So that would just be glorious, right? Especially once they finish that project they're currently working on. With
the TNG bridge.
Yeah, the TNG bridge, and all the sets for that. I mean, I think that's just going to be spectacular. So that's something that's not too far away. They actually have like a little convention they do there at Ticonderoga. So that might be something that's awesome. So I look forward to seeing you get out to that and make some videos about that experience. I think it'll be glorious. Have you ever worn a Star Trek costume, uniform, cosplay?
Yep.
Tell me.
I have. This is always where I get embarrassed. So there's this.
There's no embarrassment here. We celebrate that stuff up in here, you.
Yeah, it's just like when I was there, it's like, oh, okay, I'm the one with the Star Trek costume. But there was a place called Palladium, and it's still around, and it's basically just a big arcade, a lot of fun. And for some reason, I went there with some people, my mom actually, and one of her work friends and her son. And I was like, I'm going to wear my Star Trek costume. And so I think I wore like a Voyager-esque uniform. I don't remember if it was red or blue.
How old were you?
I would have been maybe 10 or 11, I think.
Awesome.
And then I definitely wore some to school. I remember getting into a very vivid, a very intense argument with one of my teachers because I was trying to argue that I should be allowed to wear my phaser because I considered it a stun and it wasn't a real weapon. And they're like, no, you can't have that there. We don't allow weapons at school, not even part of costumes. And I remember being very passionate about that. And that would have been maybe grade 3 or something. when that happened.
When did you decide to go from just being a fan into being a content creator? How did that decision come about?
It was a very, very slow process. Like I had been listening to podcasts for probably a decade by the time I started. And eventually I was like, you know what, I should actually do one because COVID happened. And I was like, I have all this time. Maybe I should actually start making YouTube videos and start making a podcast. And then, so I started doing the fashion videos and I was like, okay, I want to do a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's when I'll talk about Star Trek. And I started doing the Yelling About Star Trek podcast. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should actually switch over to YouTube because it's about time. I love it. I love doing YouTube videos, but I was finding it hard to always make new fashion videos, whereas I always had things to say about Trek. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start a Star Trek channel.
When you were talking about your fashion videos, is this fashion for yourself or women's fashion, men's fashion? What kind of fashion?
Yeah, it was men's fashion. So I was like trying to show people, like showing men how, okay, here's how you can dress and here's some tips that you can use to make it a lot easier so you're not intimidated by the world of men's fashion.
Well, Cristian, the M5 tells me it is now time to jump into discussion of some episodes. And as is our wont up in here on Trek Profiles, the M5 has put together a list for us to discuss. And coming up first on that list is Gambit. And this is TNG Season 7, Episodes 4 and 5, I believe. And this, of course, is the one where Picard is pretending to be a renegade archaeologist, and we're looking for this particular archaeological treasure, which turns out to be a Vulcan artifact, a psionic resonator. So what I want to know about this particular episode is why the M5 feels it is of particular importance to you. Explain.
Yeah, so it was one of those episodes, specifically part 2, that we recorded on VHS. I don't remember if we had part 1. So it was just like, all right, I want to watch Star Trek. So I'd put it on my VHS and I'd be like, I've already seen all the Borg episodes a lot. So I want to do Gambit part 2. And then I would just watch it. And it became one of those things I'd watch so much that I just started to memorize the dialogue, and even the previously on was comforting, and so I just fell in love with that episode. I remember loving the commercials that were in between, like on, I guess, City TV at the time. So it was just one of those things where it was just like it was a happy place episode. I just had a lot of fondness and nostalgia for it.
How many times do you think you've seen it?
Ooh, that's hard because I would probably say maybe 30 or 40 times. I'd have to like think about how many times I watch all my other go-to episodes, but a lot.
So my listeners will know this, but I'm a veteran, and so I always comment on sort of military things when I see them in Star Trek, and how much do I love Data having, giving Worf a tune-up in the ready room, right? I mean, just that is just chef's kiss, man. Chef's kiss right there.
So, yeah, it's funny because so professionally I do conflict resolution.
Okay.
And that's been something I've been doing for a long time, which I love. And a lot of it comes to, one of the reasons I got into it is because of Star Trek. And so what I love about that scene, it's TNG, it's classic TNG. It's like we have a conflict. Somebody does something that someone else is upset about, but then they solve it in the most TNG way, where Data's like, hey, Worf, I'm upset you did this. And then Worf said, oh, this is what I was trying to do. I didn't mean to upset you. Data says, all right, just don't do that again. And then they're best friends again. And it's perfect. And some people say it's not always realistic, but I love how if people could just do the thing where it's like, I am upset that you did this thing. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It's because of blah, blah, blah. And then he does the shirt tuck and scene's over. And then they accommodate each other. And then throughout the episode after that scene, Worf is trying to be more, all right, I'm not gonna like argue with you. And Data's like, I can also be a little bit more accommodating to you and maybe think outside the box a little bit.
One of the things that I think we've lost in the streaming era, especially the more serialized that Star Trek has gotten, is that when you tune in for an episode, God, how old am I? Tune in for an episode. When you put on an episode, in the olden days, you never knew what you were going to get, right? When you're going to get some like really sort of high concept sci-fi, where you're going to get some kind of romance story or a mystery, or in the case of Gambit, like a rip-roaring action-adventure kind of thing, right? And so you kind of never knew what you were going to get. And I think one of the things that's lost, generally speaking, in this heavy serialization that we're doing these days is that like the episodes sort of fit together. And so they're of a kind in a season. And so you don't really get as many sort of one-offs, and you sort of don't get that, what's it going to be this week, right? I mean, there's a consistent story that season, which you may or may not like. And if you don't like it, that means you're kind of out for the season. Whereas if you like it, then, it's all good. But you don't sort of get this, this serendipity that you sort of got in the olden shows, I feel a little bit. I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah. So I would say, like, going back to your comment about you're not sure what you're going to get, like it could be a romance. One thing I love about Trek is it's one of the few franchises where you can do any genre and have it fit within that universe. Like I think of, if you look at the original movies, you have this really interesting trilogy. You have The Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and Voyage Home, where one of them is just a hardcore action movie, and the other one is like a fish out of wacky comedy. Like fish out of water, wacky comedy, and it works because
actual fish out of water or actual whales out of water.
Yeah, exactly. So it fits within that thing, and I think you're right that we're sort of missing that. That's one thing I've been loving about Strange New Worlds is that somehow, I don't know how they're doing this, but they're like, let's give a consistent story. We have Pike dealing with his trauma, his future trauma. We have that being a recurring storyline. You have some reoccurring story elements with the different characters. But yet they're getting back to, hey, this episode is going to be a horror episode, and this week it's going to be like a funny, wacky comedy where everybody's acting like they're in a fairy tale world. But yet there's this really like emotional reason why this is all happening. So I'm glad that it's coming back because I do miss having so much variety in a season and not knowing what the next episode is going to be.
So speaking of weird kind of one-off episodes, let's talk about TNG Season 6, Episode 21, Frame of Mind. This, of course, is the one where Riker is in the stage play, or is he? Certainly a very interesting episode, and of course, spoiler alert, it all turns out that it's an evil plot by some aliens and Riker's defense mechanisms trying to keep him sane. Certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, a lot to unpack, but I'm wondering what parts of it stuck out for you.
Aside from like just the weirdness, like it's another one of those, okay, what the heck is going on? And I love those episodes where you're just really not sure what's happening until the end. So that stuck out to me for sure. But then there was something about watching it in university that I connected with, where Riker throughout the episode is like worrying about the play. Yes, he's like not sure what's going on with him in terms of why am I now in this mental asylum, and then now I'm back on the ship. But he's like stressed out about the play, where you can tell he has a lot of anxiety. And for some reason, I connected with him on that level of, oh my gosh, I have to do an essay next week. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm stressing about this. Or I've got a presentation that I've got to do. And there was some connection between Riker being like, oh, at least the play's over. I don't have to think about it anymore. Relating that to, oh, I've got an assignment coming up that I got to do. And there was some connection. And I found that even though it's not meant to be a comforting episode, I found watching him be stressed out about the play comforting when I was stressed out about whatever I had to do.
Okay, well, I'm glad you found comfort in this one and not an episode like, I don't know, Schisms or something like that, right?
Yeah, Schisms we got to talk about Schisms at some point. There's so many things to say about that.
Do you want to say something about it? Go right ahead.
Yeah, it's just, okay, what I love about, generally speaking, Enterprise, you got more of this, but most of the time, your teaser would give you some indication as to what this episode's going to be about. So usually on TNG, if you saw a funny teaser, it was going to be a more comedic episode. But this one is like you have Data's poem, Ode to Spot. It's hysterical. You have Riker falling asleep and then being nudged and clapping. Again, hysterical. So you think this is going to be a funny, like a little romp about, oh, what's going on with Riker? Why is he so tired? This is going to be a hysterical episode. And then you find out, oh, wait a minute. People are getting kidnapped by aliens and experimented on.
Click-clack aliens doing amputations.
Yeah. So I just love it. And again, as I always want to point out, like one thing I'll mention too is my partner. She's also a massive Trekkie. And so one of my favorite things to do when we're watching Star Trek is be like, again, there are children on this ship. How are they coping with all this? So So yeah, that episode I was just find amazing that it has one of the most hysterical openings, and then it's like no stop, and then you have one of the most chilling scenes where they're in the holodeck, and it's just so well done. And it's like, man, what an interesting idea for an episode where you have two completely different things. You have something that's so funny, and then something that's terrifying in one episode in TNG.
One of the things that I often think about when I look at episodes are some of the production things that I just sort of wonder about. And there's that whole bit where Riker is on the table and that thing is getting super close to his eye. And I'm just thinking, how did they actually do this? Like that, I don't know if I'd be down for that. If I was the actor, like that thing's getting awful close to me. I'm not up for this at all. But that would be just me.
Point. Yeah.
Schisms is definitely a trip. And it's an episode that I like, and we didn't even plan to talk about it, but I'm glad that it came up because it's an example of what we were talking about. You know, that you tune it in, and God knows what you're going to get, right? You can get Schisms, or if it's TOS, you can get Spectre of the Gun, you can get a Western, who knows, right? And it's always something that's sort of interesting. You made reference to the trilogy, the 2, 3, and 4. And I know that 4 is on the list, so maybe we should talk about Voyage Home, otherwise known as the one with the whales. Of course, the wonderful Dr. Gillian Taylor is in it, and we have the guest star of John Shuck as the Klingon ambassador and all of that. And we have time travel, and we've got all kinds of adventures and shenanigans. And of course, my favorite part is Dr. McCoy in the hospital arguing with the other surgeon. I love that whole bit there. So tell me, what about this particular movie jumps out at you? Why is it important to you?
It's one of those, it was a slow burn where I always loved the movie, but I was always like, okay, it's either Wrath of Khan or First Contact. That's my movie. That's my favorite. And then maybe it was like 4 or 5 years ago where I was like, all right, I felt like I had a heart-to-heart with myself where I was like, you know what? I think it's Voyage Home. That's my favorite Trek movie ever. And again, it's one of those ones where I just watched all the time and it became comforting, but I love how it was able to combine like so many things of what makes Star Trek great and have it feel organic. Because you have the wacky sci-fi where you're like, what the heck is this thing? Why is that probe here? What's going on? And then you have comedy, which Star Trek does comedy pretty well, but you also have the social commentary. And it's very rare that you get all three of those things combined in such a great package. And then there's just so many great moments, like the why don't you watch where you're going, you dumbass? Like it's such an incredible thing, and I just love so much about it. I love how Kirk is clueless. I love how the cab driver is just so angry, rightfully so. And what makes it even better is that Sulu points at him when they're walking away. Sulu points at the cab driver and like continues to point at him for a little bit. So I love that. I love my favorite Dr. McCoy moment is when he's doing the thing that movies will do sometimes where they're like, we'll have a character acknowledge how ridiculous the situation is just so we can be like, hey, we get it. This is a ridiculous plot. Just go with us because you're going to have a good time. And so his whole thing was like, so you're suggesting we go backward in time, pick up a bunch of humpback whales, bring them forward in time, drop them off and tell the probe what to go do with itself. Well, that's crazy. It's like, what a great way of acknowledging that, hey, we have a really silly plot, but we're going to stick with it.
One of the best decisions I think they made in the movie, and I don't know this, I didn't research this in particular, but I just sort of feel in my gut that I'm sure they had a studio note about it that they had to fight against, which was they never explained the probe really at all.
Yeah.
It's just sort of there. It shows up and it's like, yo, I've been talking to your whales. Where are the whales at? No whales? Nuke the whole site from orbit. You know, it's the only way to be sure, right? And that's it. And we have no idea where it came from. Who made it? Why? What its whole thing is? We just sort of know that it's like didn't find the whales, so it's pissed off and it's going to, eradicate everything on the planet. I know that in the novelization, there's a little bit more. I remembered reading the novelization, so there is a little bit more about the whale probe, but it's not canonical. So, which is a whole discussion that we have on Trek Profiles from time to time. But I won't get into it here. But I just love the fact that they didn't explain it, and you don't need to explain it.
You don't need to know exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it was Nicholas Meyer who was like, yeah, the studio wanted us to like even give subtitles. And he was like, no, we're not going to do that. Like, what do you want? Like, maybe the probe is just saying, hey, what do you guys want for dinner or something like that. And he's like, no, we're not going to do that. And I think the choice to not explain what the probe wanted was actually really good. And I don't know, maybe it was an novelization you mentioned, or there was another book that explained what the probe was about. And I've always been curious about, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to read it because I like not knowing, because that's not the point of the movie.
One of the things that I have always appreciated about the Star Trek that I love the most is when they really show us sort of the mystery and the grandeur of space and sort of the whole grand mystery of the universe. And I think that motion picture was really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole sense of like that being on a starship was rare and it was hard to make it go, right? To use a Packlidism. And it was just, but it was a lot of work. And the thing that they were doing was special and unusual. And there's so much out there that we can't even understand, which is kind of how they left it at the end of Motion Picture with V'Ger, right? Like it went on to do some incredible thing that we really can't even comprehend, right? It went to higher planes of being, whatever that is, right? It's just sort of a mystery. And I love it when Star Trek is sort of in awe of the universe in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I feel that sometimes Star Trek does that I like less, and I know some fans can have a different opinion, I'm okay with it, but it's just that they make being in space sort of so routine and ordinary that it's like, like it's not even a thing to worry about anymore. And I don't like that as much. And that's one of the things that I really liked about this was that, the probe is like just part of this great tapestry. Ooh, see what I did there? Of stuff that's out there and we don't have to explain it. It's beyond our understanding. It's communicating at a level that we can't really grasp, but these whales can, and we're just going to leave that mystery be there. And I love that. And the more Star Trek does that, the more I'm here for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's such an interesting thing you say about like, okay, a lot of times Star Trek, you get the feeling that it's just so easy. Like we were talking about TNG. I love the Enterprise D. I love TNG, but I also love that people will call it like the luxury Marriott hotel, where it's like, this is a ship in space, but yet it's so comfortable. It's luxurious. There's tons of space. And, there's problems sometimes, but generally speaking, it's pretty easy. It's easy to live there. And it's like, is that realistic? Because space is a big place. And as you say, there's like a whole universe out there.
Yeah, well, I think you hit it on the head earlier when we were talking about schisms, which is, were they chopping up little kids on board the Enterprise D? I mean, that is a life-altering scenario. And I think that's one of the things I like about Strange New Worlds and some of the newer shows and streaming. Like the characters are living with the consequences of things. And in early Trek, especially, they did not live with the consequences. Mm-hmm. So, you'd see people have, like, for instance, the example I'll give is Voyager, Harry, Kim, and Deadlock. Going into the alternate universe, knowing that your prime self died and you're like the alternate, or, depending on which point of view, which is prime and which is alternate, right? You can pick whichever side you want. But I got to say, that is something that someone would be living with for a very long time.
Yeah. And it was just like, yeah, there was just that one line like, well, this is a little weird. Well, weird's a part of the job. And then, okay, the other big beef, there's the episode Memorial where they're like, hey, we're having all of these traumatic memories of this war that we were not part of. And the doctor at the end of the episode is like, yeah, this is PTSD. Even though it's all imagined, you're not able to get rid of the PTSD. It's going to be with you forever, I think is what he tells Harry, Kim, or someone. And
which episode was this?
A Memorial where they're coming back from a planet, and they all start to have these flashbacks to this war where they killed a bunch of people that were innocent.
Oh, right.
And they're all traumatized. And great idea, great concept. Next week, never mentioned again. And everybody's fine. And it's like, there should be, I'm not saying that everybody has to be miserable for the rest of the series, but there should be some acknowledgement that, hey, this is, we're having to deal with some things.
All right, let's talk about some Deep Space Nine.
Sure.
Let's talk about Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 26, Call to Arms. This, of course, is the one where we're mining the wormhole. Rom and Lita get hitched, and, of course, the Federation loses Deep Space Nine, and the Dominion War really begins as a hot war. Certainly a very pivotal episode. Lots going on, lots of different things happening. It's almost unbelievable that all this stuff happens in like 45 minutes or whatever the runtime is. There's so much that goes on in this episode. So what part of the episode speaks to you? What are the things that jump out at you? What part of it touched you in particular?
Ooh, that's a tough question because there's so much. I think the feeling that people are going about their day, they're talking to each other, they're having light conversations, but you get the sense that they know that something's coming, and there's a sense of unease. So I love that. I love that aspect of it. I'm just trying to think of particular standout scenes that I really enjoy. Like one of the great character moments is at the very end when Gul Dukat is in Cisco's office and he sees that the baseball is still there. And Wayun makes some comment like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, I thought everything would have been taken away by Cisco or something." And Gul Dukat's like, "No, he's letting me know he's coming back." So that's a really cool character moment. There's just so much. Like the conversation between Cisco and Jake is fantastic, where he comes home for dinner and is like, "Hey, I'm now a reporter," and Cisco's not pleased about that story he just wrote. So it's. And what I love too about that is you don't get a lot of you get a lot of Jake and Cisco in DS9, but beyond that, you don't really get to see parents interacting with their children, not in that way. And so there's just, I don't know, there's just so much about that episode that I love. I think what it does really well is it gives everybody great character moments where they're all dealing with things that they've been dealing with for the season. Kira and Odo have a great conversation around where they're at romantically, and there's that really touching moment where I can't remember who says it, but someone says, "Let's just focus, let's just not do anything romantic and let's focus at the task at hand." And then she's like, "Great, all we have to do is just worry about the Dominion, worry about the station, and see if we can prevent a war from starting." All right, I feel much better. And it's a very sweet conversation between two people who are more comfortable dealing with the Dominion War than dealing with each other.
Consistently in Star Trek, I think there's sort of a mistake that happens when in the show, and both fans talking about the show use the terms Starfleet and the Federation interchangeably. And I feel like that's almost always a mistake, because the Federation is not supposed to be a military dictatorship, but at many times it feels that way, that Starfleet is sort of in charge of the Federation in a lot of ways. And that's very disturbing when you think about, sort of what the fan idea of the Federation is supposed to be. The idea that Starfleet is running it is not, that's not consistent, right? That doesn't sound right, but yet it's often depicted that way a lot of times in the show. And also, going along with that, there's this sense, because Star Trek is told primarily through Starfleet characters, that's what the Federation is. And so you're getting it from both sides, because we have this the show is from the point of view of Starfleet characters, and it seems that Starfleet's kind of running the Federation based on a lot of things we see in the show. And that's one of the reasons I really like the Jake character, is because he's one of the first times where you have someone who's like, "To hell with all this nonsense. I ain't doing any of that. And I'm going to go do this other thing. And I'm going to go become a reporter." And, you see, like, an example of this would be like how many times when people are looking at the Picard show, right? It doesn't even matter what season. And you feel that like Picard leaving Starfleet is a loss. Like he's not supposed to have left Starfleet. Maybe maybe could people have fulfilling lives in the Federation that are outside of Starfleet? Like, that's not a question that you really get answered a lot in the show.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I was very excited for Jake to be like, Starfleet, F all that noise. I'm going to go do something else. I just thought it was glorious and wonderful. And that's actually one of the things I've loved about the Picard show generally, is that you're in seasons 1 and 2, I should say, because season 3 less so. We're getting a lot of life outside of Starfleet, but in the Federation or in other worlds around, the Alpha Quadrant. And I think that that's very interesting to me. and seeing a point of view about the 23rd/24th/ very beginnings of the 25th century that are very different from what we've seen in TOS TNG previously. Let me just stop there and have you react to that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, because one of the things that's always bothered me is that we never really got to see what does the average person look like who isn't part of Starfleet. What's their home like? What are they doing day to day? Are they fulfilled? What opportunities are there for other people? And so I love, like, even being able to see Sisko's restaurant, his father's restaurant, in some of the episodes was amazing, because like, okay, this is not a Starfleet room. This is not like, it's not futuristic. It's just a restaurant, and this is what he does, and they value it. And it's really great to see, because you don't get to see that very much. I think the closest example that I can think of in TNG, especially before DS9,
family,
was Picard's friend, who was like a cartographer. No, not a cartographer. He was doing something in the, I don't know what the
episode Family
specialty is.
Best of Both Worlds Part 3.
Yeah, exactly. Which is such a cool little trilogy. But he was like exploring the ocean. He's like, hey, Picard, you should come and join me and do that. And it's like, okay, here's someone who's passionate about what he's doing, about what they're doing, and it's not Starfleet.
In TOS, in The Conscience of the King, you have a very brief set of scenes that are in that civilian household on the planet.
Right, yeah.
That's one of the very few times you get like an authentic, these are regular Federation people, like, in their home. I don't think there's anything else in TOS like that. Very little in TNG like that. I mean, there's a few little things here and there, a few cafe scenes, restaurants and stuff like that. Shore leave kind of scenarios, but not too much. So
you get the Kevin and the good tea, nice house.
No. But those are not real. Those people are not real.
But it was based on what the life was like before that happened, right?
Yeah, I get it, but I mean, they're not part of a society. There's not like,
true.
They're not like going out and shopping, picking up a baguette at the corner store, or whatever the Federation equivalent of that is. You know what I mean? I get what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They're just sort of on a desert island, like two people living on a desert island in a way. I totally get it. And by the way, I have a serious problem with that Survivors episode. We can get into that if you want, but
okay. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that later.
All right, let me make a note. We'll come back to that. Survivors. But I want to say something, Christian, which I feel like we've been very hard on Star Trek in this interview, but it's okay. Yeah. I don't, and this is, a little bit of behind the scenes. I mean, we do not plan out the show and what we're going to say. I mean, the only thing we really know is we're going to talk about a certain list of episodes. So whichever way the conversation goes on Trek Profiles is how it goes. And sometimes it's like sunshine and rainbows, and sometimes it's a critical analysis. And I feel like in this one, we're having a critical eye, and that's okay. Cause this, I'm in the spirit of Star Trek, classic Star Trek. You never know what you're going to get when you tune in for an episode of Trek Profiles.
Exactly.
So we've talked about a series of episodes. We've talked about your fandom and how you get into Star Trek, your life as a content creator. I suppose the question for you now is why does Star Trek matter to you?
I think, so if I want to get super personal, part of when I was growing up, my parents went through a pretty bad divorce. There was a lot of conflict on both sides, a lot of, as I like to call it, divorce shenanigans, all the accoutrements that you'd expect. And there was something about Star Trek that just felt so right. The fact that, especially with TNG, because this is like what I always go back to, DS9 is what I think is the strongest, but I think TNG is my favorite just because I love it and I grew up with it. But what I loved about TNG was that anytime you had a conflict, you could sort it out. Like characters on the Enterprise, they did get into a fight with each other, which was very rare. They'd figure it out. And Picard was always able to, for the most part, find the diplomatic way out of a problem without having to blow stuff up. And so I always liked that. And there was something comforting about watching Trek where, like, divorce stuff is going on. There's a lot of conflict happening, things I can't control. But yet when I tuned into Star Trek, I could boot it up. It would start off with, oh my gosh, what's happening to the Enterprise? Oh my gosh, I can't believe they just destroyed the Enterprise. But then, by the end of the episode, it's no problem. We're all back. Everything's okay. And I like that the situation was always solved. And by the end of those 45 minutes, I could be like, all right, I feel satisfied. And the characters themselves became like family. Like Picard is like a second father in a lot of ways. And I could look up to those characters. So I love that aspect. And I also just love all the weirdness. I love being able to turn on an episode and being like, why is this thing happening to the characters? What's this giant anomaly, over there? What does this mean? And then I love technology. So I love being able to say things like, or be able to watch a show where they could just talk to the computer and ask it questions. And there's a little bit of one of the nerdiest things I've done recently is I found out that with my Alexa, you can program her to respond to computer. So I will say computer, blah, 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 and she'll respond. Yeah, so just the Alexa thing is cool. Like, there's been a couple of times where I'd be watching Trek and someone will say computer and then she'll respond. So the reason I go off on that tangent is because I just love all the futuristic technology, which I think stood out to me as a kid as well.
Well, Cristian, I've enjoyed this conversation, but the M5 is now signaling me that it is time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Okay.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5 just for you. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title. Are you ready to face the Kobayashi Maru?
Yes.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Cristian's responses.
Kobayashi Maru ready.
Best-looking Klingon ship design, the Nekfar, the Vorcha, or the Katinga?
The Katinga.
Pick your favorite ending for the phrase, I'm a doctor, not a blank. I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. I'm a doctor, not a moon shuttle conductor. I'm a doctor, not a torpedo technician.
I'm a doctor, not a torpedo technician.
Hello, Starfleet cadet. Which California-class vessel will be your first assignment? The Fresno, the Vacaville, or the Inglewood?
The Inglewood.
Who is worse, Landru or Val?
Landru.
Which archaeological find do we want to add to our collection? The Stone of Gaul, the Kurlan Niskos, or the Bentaka Spire?
The Bentaka Spire.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing performance.
Cristian, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Excellent. I did not cheat, by the way, in case anyone's wondering.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Cristian is awarded the title of Vedic of the Channel in Order.
So there you go.
Cool. Awesome.
So, Cristian, why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can follow all of your various productions, all of your videos, all of your podcasts, and how they can get in touch with you and berate you for your hot takes about Star Trek that they disagree with.
Yeah, so if you want to yell at me, you can find me on all of my, you can find me on my YouTube channel, which is Yelling About Star Trek. So just hop onto a video, comment. If you're angry, please let me know. I'd love to debate you, and we can have a great conversation. You can also follow me on TikTok. I'm at Mr. Yells About Star Trek. You can find me on Twitter, although I haven't been using Twitter very much. I need to start doing that again at Yelling About Star Trek. Yeah, those are the best places that you can find me.
Thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your missives of felicitations, your communications of condemnation, or your recipes for a Captain Shaw blue steak dinner that really slaps to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Anything you send me can be used in the show, or it may be launched into the chasm of the Necrid Expanse. This time, I leave you with a quote from Captain Picard, who in the episode Gambit Part 2 said, quote, "You were right, Talara. The Resonator cannot be stopped by phasers and shields, but it can be defeated by peace." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
Yeah, that's smart though, just in case.
Yeah, man, you never know. You never know. So hey, it's great to get the chance to talk to you. Thanks for agreeing to be on.
Yeah.
You're the first Trek fan I've actually interviewed off of TikTok. So I only started doing the TikTok recently. I don't post all that much, but I certainly look at a lot of stuff. It's a very different sort of vibe than over there where on Twitter where I'm most active. So I'm enjoying that. I just got back from the Star Trek cruise. It's been a little crazy and my head is still like, in weird vacation mode.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to do that one year, hopefully soon.
If you want to see a lot of audio and video, just go to my Twitter and look at those last few weeks. There's a million. I posted 20 times a day. So lots of audio and video. So if you want to see any of that stuff, go check it out. It's wild. The most hilarious part. So I had something go semi-viral, which was surprising because most of my stuff goes nowhere. But we did this ship excursion and we got on this catamaran, and the purpose of the catamaran was to take you to the beach excursion. So that was their only purpose. The catamaran trip was not part of the cruise, or part of the excursion. It was just they're the transport, right? Well, these guys were not having that at all. They're like, no. They went and they did a dance act. They had karaoke. I mean, they were set the dial to 11, I mean, they were really going all out, and no one would sing karaoke. And I was like, all right, I got a song for you. So I go back there and I requested Faith of the Heart.
Oh, that's perfect.
and it literally people just went nuts on the boat and everyone was singing along and all that. And I was like, I'll put this up on Twitter. And I put it out there, and that got about 50,000 views, which was a lot.
That's incredible.
Yeah, a lot for me. And it was really funny because I learned a lot about the kinds of reactions you get where it's here's this great moment. It was not a great moment and you suck. That was one comment, or, that song sucks and how dare you? That was another thing. There was this one young lady who was sort of leaning up against a pole with her eyes closed, and they were screenshotting her and being yeah, she's in the mood for this song, and it's actually she was passed out. Because
Right.
it was an all-you-can-drink excursion, and she'd had enough.
That's incredible. I love the song. I know it's divisive, but I feel like it gets a lot of hate when it's not necessary. But that's a whole topic.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll tell you this, man. At the Star Trek convention in August every year, I don't know if you've ever been to that. You go to the karaoke, and when that song comes on, all the Trek fans lose their goddamn minds, right? Everybody loves it. Nobody says, how dare you, and walks out, or whatever. That's only online losers. Everybody who's there, they love it. And
That's cool, because
go ahead.
I was there last year, but I didn't get to go to karaoke because I couldn't get tickets or something. But hopefully when I go back next time.
No, you don't need
free?
tickets for karaoke. You don't You don't even need a ticket for the convention to go to karaoke.
Oh, you know what? Maybe there was I remember there was a reason I couldn't go. I was feeling off. I ate too much one day. It could have been it, but that would have been fun.
Yeah, no, karaoke is absolutely A+, man. Although, was that the first time you'd been?
Yeah, this is my first convention experience.
All right, well, we should save that for the show. Let's save that for the show. But the one thing I'll say is that the Bally's sucked relative to where it used to be at the Rio and before that at the Hilton. The Bally's was a terrible location.
That's what I heard. That was the consensus that I heard from everyone, was that, hey, great convention, but Bally's is terrible.
Yeah, Bally's was absolutely sucked. And the number one thing, and this I don't need to save for the show because I've already talked about this numerous times on my podcast. But one of the cool things about when it was over at the Rio, which it will be again this summer, is that we take over the whole convention space, and it's all contiguous. So there's none of this separate floors business. It's all one area, and we own the whole thing. And there's no normies running around. I mean, there's always some family from Topeka that's in the hotel that didn't quite get the memo that it's a Star Trek thing. But for the most part, it's all Star Trek up in the Rio. And there's nobody running around that convention center who doesn't know what's going on. Whereas at the Bally's, there was a lot of people that just had no idea. And so you're walking through the casino, and, there's people that just it was just too many normies, you need to go get your game on, with all your freaky Trekkie friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's your favorite captain or character?
Captain Picard, and then favorite character is Data.
All right. So yeah, so I figure we'll just do this right now.
Although it's getting hard because Pike is so good in Strange New World, so it's like he's messing up my rankings
a
little
happens,
bit.
Right? I don't know if you've seen Picard season 3, but I don't know. Shaw's creeping up on me.
Yeah, I'm loving Shaw. Like I guess we'll talk about season 3, but I am just this is what I hoped for when Patrick Stewart came out and said, "Hey, Picard's back." This is what I envisioned for season 1. So I'm loving it.
So on the cruise, Todd Stashwick was a surprise last minute addition.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I can just tell you that dude is like, there's some guests, some Star Trek talent. We got to save it for the show. Well, I'm going to save that for the show.
Yeah, save it for the show. Yeah, for sure.
We're going to save that for the show. Federation ship, Klingon ship, could be a Federation, Starfleet vessel, anything you want.
You know what? This is weird. I'm going to have to go on record now, but I think I'm going to say the Reliant or Reliant class ships.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Even though the Enterprise E for me is so close because it's the one but I realized the last couple of years and the Reliant class ships just look so good.
All right, I got it. Do you know the famous story about the Miranda class?
Yeah, Miranda class. Yeah, that it was flipped upside down by accident, right? And
that's just a great story, right? That's just
fantastic.
Such
a great thing that happened by accident, and now it's iconic.
That's right. It's canon, baby. So, how would you describe your style or aesthetic?
I would say it's a more classic. Isn't the right word because it's not like old timey like 1950s classic, but metrosexual might be the right word. Where it's
okay.
Like, all right, I like a good button up. I like turtlenecks. I like colors that can work well with other colors. So I like a lot of neutral colors because you can get like navies and you can mix that with grays, with browns. You've got lots of options. So I seem like lately, like I think I love going between turtlenecks, button-ups, and polos, I would say. And then also V-necks are now in my thing, but also bomber jackets. So there's a lot.
So if a guy comes to you who's a friend of yours and says, Christian, I don't know anything about clothes. I need to put together a wardrobe. I know you're in Canada. So how much Canadian do you think like a starter men's wardrobe in your aesthetic would run?
Ooh, okay. So if you're going... Now you got to be strategic because you want to try and find sales. Like I know Banana Republic, Old Navy, they have a ton of sales. So if you go, especially if you go in the summer, you could probably maybe get a good starter wardrobe for $100 to $200. And what you want to do is you'd want to buy a lot of different T-shirts, or like let's say you want V-necks. You're a V-neck guy. Mm-hmm. You'd want to get V-necks in a bunch of different neutral colors, and then you want to do the same thing for shorts and pants. Maybe get some brighter stuff to throw in here and there. And that way you can usually combine, like what you want to do is you'd want to avoid getting a shirt that you can only wear with one specific pair of pants. You'd want to try and get stuff that you could wear with everything. And that way you can just keep going back and forth.
Cargo shorts, yay or nay?
Nay.
I've had this discussion before. And I don't know if it was on the actual podcast, because just so you know, one of the things I do is I often live tweet Star Trek episodes. And I remembered I just finished up Enterprise as we're recording this not too long ago. And there's an episode of Enterprise, I want to say it's in season 3. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's season 3, where the Enterprise engages in high piracy, space piracy.
Oh,
legit,
yeah,
100% space piracy. Like we are going to take this equipment off this other vessel who is equipped, people who were nice to us. We are going to board their vessel and steal all their stuff because we need it episode. Because reasons, right?
Yeah.
And one way that I've taken to analyzing Star Trek, and this is just for myself, and I realize, this isn't anything that I recommend other people do, but just for myself, I always try to flip the episode. And I imagine in my head that what if that other ship was like the TNG Enterprise, like for some other culture. And this alien shows up as like, hey, by the way, we're taking the nacelles off your starship because we have our own reasons. And hope y'all sort that out. So we're taking these. Bye. How would we feel about that? Because those characters on that ship were the heroes in somebody else's story.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think even reading some of the behind the scenes, it's like they were meant to be that equivalent because they're just out there to explore the galaxy. And I think if we were to watch it on TNG, we would be appalled. We would say, how dare they? It doesn't matter how serious the situation is, but they can't, you shouldn't go onto someone else's ship and take their stuff. And so I think you're right. We would be very upset. But I will say, like, even if you take out the necessity, the fact that he had to get to the meeting on time, he had to get to the council thing on time, and you take all that stuff out, what I love is that even though we as the characters understand why he did it, and I think for the most part you don't blame him, or you can accept why he did it, and that's why you can keep watching it and not feel like, okay, I can't watch this guy anymore. But I love that Captain Archer himself is dealing with the guild, and by I'm trying to think of where this would be in season 3, but
it's
when
like maybe
they get
2/3 of the way through. It's about 2/3 of the way through, and I'm going off memory here, but that's about right.
Where he has that conversation with Daniels, and he's like, "Hey, you can't go and you can't take the shuttle you can't take the bomb to the weapon because you're not supposed to die here. There's a bunch of other stuff you need to do for the future." And he's like, no, I got to do this. And then Travis at some point is like, "Hey, Captain, do you have do you feel like you have to pay a penance for what you've done?" And you see that that's how he's feeling. And then even by the time they get home in season 4, he's still dealing with the fact that he did all of this bad stuff to save Earth. And he's like, he doesn't like doesn't like her, but his, what's her name? Captain Hernandez.
Captain Hernandez of the Columbia. Yep.
Of the Columbia. And he sees what he lost because in her, he sees what he used to be before they went to the Expanse and all that stuff, or the Delphic Expanse. So I love the fact that even though you can kind of side with him, he himself is dealing with it because he can't get over the fact that he just basically did something that he would never do, and that he knows that if it happened to his ship, he would be really appalled by it. Yeah. So I never really thought about it. I've always liked Dr. Crusher, but the thing is, I want to become a parent. My partner and I, we've spoken about having kids. We're on the same page. And I don't know how long or how young I was when I knew I wanted to be a father, but I knew fairly early on that, hey, I want to have kids at some point. And so this idea that I don't even get the choice to say, hey, you know what? Let me be in this person's life. That would really upset me. And it's like, and it's hard because I love these characters, and in my head, again, because I know you're always say like, hey, don't go behind the scenes. Let's try and focus on what's on screen. My head, it's like, Terry Metalis is like, man, they really should have had a kid together. Let's find a way of addressing that because we weren't able to do that in season 1 because I wasn't the showrunner back then. But from a storyline perspective, it's really, really tough to see that she didn't even tell him about it. It's not even like Dr. Marcus, where she's like, hey, I have David's your son, but I don't want you I don't want him in your life being on the spaceship.
Well, I think there's a lot of this, though, Christian, in Star Trek, especially in the new streaming era, that if you follow my idiotic recommendation of looking at the show within the 4 corners of the screen, the things that come later do affect it. So if you watch Discovery's episode Lethe, which in my opinion, best episode of season 1, without any question, without any doubt, like heads and shoulders above the rest, my opinion, other people can disagree, it's okay. But that episode explains so much about Sarek and Spock and Michael Burnham. Then you go back and you watch Journey to Babel.
Right.
And that whole episode with Sarek and dealing with Spock and why he disagreed with Spock's, joining Starfleet, like it really did just click in like puzzle pieces. And it's impossible. It is impossible, I think, as a serious Star Trek fan, someone who's trying to take the show on its own terms, maybe I fail, but it's impossible to have the same reaction to Journey to Babel after seeing Lethe that you would if you had never seen it.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I've got to go back and watch Discovery because I remember that episode vaguely, but not in great detail. But yeah, it's hard to watch something and not think about what's happening, even though when I'm watching Clues, that was in like early 90s, and they had no concept that they were going to be coming back in 2023. But it impacts the character because it's that person.
Yep.
So it's hard not to do.
So
and I think
that's your double header. Watch Lethe, then watch Journey to Babel. Just watch it back to back, and just see how the interplay works in your mind. You could do some great content on that too, right? And be like, here's what I originally thought about this episode. Here's what I think about it now, and it's like it's very different once you watch them back to back. It's like when you're making food, right? You can have an opinion on red peppers, you can have an opinion on hummus, you can have an opinion on salt and pepper. When you put them all together and contrast them, it's like something unexpected happens, and that's what I think would happen here. You remember the Bentaka Spire?
No, I just sounded cool, but I don't remember, like, the two of them I don't remember is that one and then the different Klingon classes. And it's like, oh, which one do I actually like?
Do you remember the Deep Space Nine episode where Cisco gets the hologram of the lost Bajoran city?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
That one thing that's in the middle of the room, that's the Bentaka Spire. That he's literally looking, that's the Bentaka Spire. Yeah. The Klingon ships, you'll have to look that up, but those are all real. So there is the Nekvar, the Vorcha, the Katinga. The Katingas are the one from the beginning of TMP. The three of them going into V'ger. That's the Katinga class. The Vorcha is like the one you see all the time in Deep Space Nine.
Like they're larger ships.
Yeah, the larger, not the birds of prey.
I have that toy.
Oh, okay, there you go. You go. Yeah. So, and all those Dr. McCoy-isms are real. Those are all from the show or the movies. Yeah. They're not all from Prime McCoy, but the torpedo technician one is from the Kelvin movies.
Into Darkness.
Yeah.
Which
So,
I'm not sure why I picked that one, but I do love McCoy. Like, I think when I love the like the Kelvin verse, but I think one of the best things is what's his name who plays Bones?
Carl Urban.
Yeah, he is so good as McCoy. He's perfect.
He absolutely is. He did his homework in the show. He had the mannerisms down. He had a little bit of the accent, sort of that soft Georgia accent. I thought he was just fantastic. I mean, I really enjoyed the Kelvin films. One of my favorite captains that I feel like we never got enough of was Captain Robau.
Oh, yeah, he was cool.
Yeah, because we all have the same haircut, So he had like one of the best haircuts of all, Star Trek captains. I was really interested in him, and seeing him get killed right away, made me kind of sad. So there you go. All right. Boom diggity, we're done. Was that okay for you?
Yeah, that was excellent.
Any regrets?
I don't think so.
It's always weird in a case like this, because sometimes I have people on that I actually know, and that's easy. But in a case like this, I'm sending a blind email to somebody, or a blind DM, and I'm like, hey, I'm a weirdo podcaster. Do you want to be on my show? You never know what you're going to get. But I appreciate you being on. I feel like, though, we were awful negative, man. I don't know. I think some of my listeners are going to give you a hard time.
I hope we were just having... Because the way I think about it is that we love something, we can criticize it as long as we're not like, I didn't think we were Trek bashing. I just think we were saying, hey, you know what? We love aspects of Trek, but there's also things we don't like. And I like to, like on my stuff, I like to acknowledge that. So hopefully it wasn't too negative.
That's okay.
I'm going to worry about that. We'll see.
No, it's all right. So do you still do the fashion stuff?
I would love to, but it's really hard to do that and do the channel. And I want to get back into my podcasting. I'm also in film school, so it's just there's a lot of stuff going on right now. But I would love to be able to go full time with YouTube and bring back the fashion channel. And ideally, in the perfect world, I'd love to do crossovers where I'm like crossing over and talking about fashion in Star Trek, because there's a lot of great fashion in Trek, and there's a lot of awful fashion in Trek that I would love to break down.
Oh, we're going to have to examine that. So who is the most fashionable character in Trek?
So if we're looking at uniforms, I would say for me, it's Captain Pike. Like Captain Pike Strange New Worlds, he's fit. The uniform looks great. The hair is on point. And I think he's just like the top of the top. If you look at the worst, I would say maybe Wesley in season 1. Like he was just not given great sweaters.
The rainbow sweater?
Like the rainbow sweater, or like even that brown sweater I think he's wearing in the first episode.
Uh-huh.
Not great, but so yeah, there's some weird fashion choices, I think. But it's also hard because I feel like it's only been in maybe the more modern shows and movies that we've gotten really good civilian fashion. Because typically in Trek, civilians have not treated badly, but they haven't been given great clothing.
Every time I look at whatever Jake is wearing in Deep Space Nine, I just cringe. It's like, it literally looks like someone ripped apart a sofa and like wrapped it around him. I mean, it's bad.
See, Jake is the exception because I feel like with Jake, what he's wearing should be bad. But somehow for me, he pulls it off in a way that Wesley couldn't pull it off for the average. Like, let's get a human character who's not part of Starfleet walking around.
Say more about why Jake's fashion should be bad. Say more about that.
It just, because he's wearing these big sweaters that are kind of ugly. And it's like, I would not wear them in real life, but there's something about the way he's wearing it, and maybe it's the confidence that he can pull it off and it doesn't feel like he's badly dressed. Whereas, why can't I think of it was another season 4 episode, TNG, the Tribunals.
The Drumhead?
Yeah, Drumhead. There's a dude in there who looks like he's got this, like, looks like he's wearing like really bad jeans, like his shirt's too big, and he's there at the trial and he walks away when everybody leaves. And it's just like, that's some terrible fashion going on.
One of the things I really appreciate about Star Trek generally is that it's timeless. And because of the fact that everyone's in like a Starfleet uniform, which is sort of a basic set of colors, like it's not anchored to a particular period in time. But then when I look at that Voyager episode where they're hanging out on the Santa Monica Pier, I think, oh my God, stop it. Like, you cannot be serious. Like all the TOS stuff when they're going back into the 30s or like the Nazi episode, that stuff doesn't bother me. But oh my God, when they're wearing that, maybe it's because I was alive at that time.
Yeah.
And they're all wearing the 90s fashion. I think, eeks, I don't know. It's not for me.
I was thinking what I'd love to do one year at a convention is to try and get a crew together to go as the Voyager crew in the 90s. Like, I think that'd be a fun cosplay that people might go, hey, what are you? Oh, I get what you're doing.